just tell us your first name?
Yeah, my first name's Noah.
Awesome. You tell us what your dreams were as a kid?
Yeah. As a child, the only thing I ever thought and cared about was basketball. I was good at it. I loved it. I was the best at it. I was rewarded for it. I spent almost all day, every day for my first almost 20 years of life playing basketball. At home, at school, at basketball practice. That was what I loved more than anything.
Could you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your general relationship with your parents?
My father was my principal. He was an elementary school principal, so from kindergarten until 5th grade, he was there all of the time as far as at school, at home. Education was very important, sports were very important, and he was omnipresent in all of that, but also he was a principal at home as well, and it was not really a relationship based on love or anything like that. It was very performance related, do well, or it's not that we don't love you, do well, or yeah, you won't be really received that well. And so in school and in sports, everything was kind of performative based. And so for my father, I remember a lot about him that he was always there and always judging and always criticizing, and nothing was ever good enough. And for my mother, even though she was there, I don't remember her at all. And so it's an interesting feeling to feel like she was in the background so much that I don't really have many clear memories of my mother, even though she was present. Yeah.
How would you describe your relationship with your dad and the one with your mom?
For my father, conditional. There were never hugs or I love yous or anything pleasant that I can remember. And as for a child, it feels so important to look back on it. I would be lying if I didn't say I don't have some resentment from that, insofar as like a lot of my friends have children, and it's so obviously important to care for that child regardless of their performance and regardless of what they do. And to look back, I was conditioned to be a perfectionist from a very early age, where the only thing that was allowed was the highest level of performance, and that came with a lot of upsides. To look at it now, I am a high achiever, I am good at a lot of things, but no amount of time away from my father doesn't have him still right here on my shoulder pointing out that if it's not perfect, that it's not good enough. And so I'll be 40 this month, to be this age and still feel like I have some of that perfectionism to shed and some of that performance-based love to come to terms with, that I can be loved just by existing and just by being a person. It's taken a very long time to come to terms with that, and my fiance right now is the first person who's ever kind of showed me that loving me is not conditional, and that's been heavy. So with my father, very performance-based and tense. I felt like I had to be the best at everything, and nothing, A-minuses were not okay. It was 100% or nothing. And like I said, that comes with upsides, but it comes with a lot of frustration as a kid, to feel like you can't make a mistake in the age range where you're almost entirely mistakes. Kids don't know they figure out how to exist in this world by mistakes, and I felt like as a child those weren't allowed. But for my mother, she didn't play much of a proactive role in our upbringing as far as I can remember it. Maybe there's memories blocked out, but she struggled with her mental health her whole life. And so to look back on it, father played the leader role, mother played maybe a supporting role, but I remember her being a bit on the volatile side, a little unpredictable, but absent for whatever reason. She lived there, but I don't have strong memories of her being around. And I'm trying to figure out now, is that something that I've blocked out for some sort of a reason, or did she just not do much? Yeah.
What'd you learn from them, good or bad?
From my father, I did learn that I have a lot of innate ability and talent. And like I said, with that came a certain amount of perfectionism, like I had better use it and use it to the best of my ability, sure, but also nothing other than greatness is allowed. And like I said, that I think that comes with a lot of upsides, and I am grateful for certain parts of that, genetically, biologically, but at the same time, I learned also that it's not okay to not be perfect, and that's a pretty tough line to maintain. But from my mother, I did spend the bulk of my time with my father, and so my mother, she has a great sense of humor, definitely learned to laugh. My father isn't much for laughing. I have maintained and cultivated a great sense of humor and love stand-up, and from my mother, man, that's hard question. I don't have much in the memory bank as far as what I learned from her.
Could you tell us about your first love and how that felt?
Basketball, I tell people, it's not just the first thing that I love. I felt like until well into adulthood, it was the only thing that I loved. And that, I don't wear that as a badge of honor or courage. That doesn't seem healthy. Like, to love something so much that you give your all to it, sure. But people and friendships and relationships, it was not cool. Like, I didn't have a great relationship with anyone in my family, not my father, not my brother, not my mother, not my sister. And so it turned into loving things. And basketball was a thing that I could give my whole heart to. It never judged me. It proved that I was good enough, that I was capable. And basketball, I say it to this day, is the first thing I loved, and for the longest time, and until somewhat recently, the only thing that I ever truly loved. And
Can you describe that love?
yeah, it was all consuming. It was 100%. It was the only thing I thought of. I've had addictive type tendencies from a very young age, and basketball took up so much brain space. It was all I ever thought about, all I ever did, and it just so happened that I was also really good at it. And that felt nice to have this space where I could be creative and I could have fun, but I could be talented and I could be revered. And since I didn't feel like I got that at home, basketball is a place where I could be special. And I mean, you could say show off, but it wasn't that. It was that I was good, and so it looks like showing off. But I just loved to do it. I loved the way I was received by doing it. And later in life, when I hurt myself and couldn't do it anymore, you could imagine the loss of self that came with that.
How did that loss feel?
When I hurt myself just after leaving high school, it was the closest to death that I could have ever felt at the time, and I spent the ensuing 12 years in and out of active addiction, pretty much in. But when I lost the thing that I thought I was here on earth to do, suddenly I realized there was this underworld of the kids in my college staying in their dorm rooms and taking mushrooms or smoking weed or getting high or doing whatever they were doing. I never even saw them when I was going to school and I was playing, but I didn't care about any of that. And the moment that I was no longer able to do the thing that I thought I was here to do, all I wanted to do was get out of my own head. And I did that by getting fucked up and staying back in the dorms and not going to class, and instead choosing to get high or choosing to take mushrooms instead of going to class. And that provided me the escape that I needed to get out of the fact that I just lost who I was as a person. When that was all, that's like, there was no secondary plan. The only reason I was at college was to play sports. And once that was no longer an option, I really didn't care much that I was alive. And I don't think that's healthy.
Did you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak, if it may be that?
Yeah, if we're going to talk about serious, like, I remember I had my first girlfriend maybe in 6th grade, and yeah, when you're in 6th grade and someone breaks up with you, it feels devastating, but that's all relative to what you've experienced. But you're talking big and important and powerful and felt like everything falling apart. Yeah, it was that. What was that? It was the very reason, as I convinced my young mind that I was here on earth to be here, the very reason that I was here, once that was taken away, you feel like you have no more purpose, no place to be, no place in the culture, and that is a level of heartbreak that, like I always say, I'd rather get punched in the face than have my heart broken like that. And I still agree. I could take a little bit of physical pain, but that is existential and huge. And yeah, that was probably the most powerful one I had felt at the time. Yeah.
What do you think your purpose is now?
In my upbringing, as much as I had basketball, what I loved to do more than anything outside of that was music. I like to sing, I like to dance, I like to move, I have great rhythm, I'm good on instruments, and the difference between singing and dancing as a boy in the 80s and early 90s is that basketball, they were like, that's what boys do, get out there and do that, we love you for it. As far as singing and dancing goes, people closest to you, your male friends, they don't see it that way. You get mocked for anything that's out of what might be traditionally masculine, and there's probably still plenty of that these days, but in the 80s and 90s, that was just how it was. Like if you're a dude and you're doing not dude stuff, then you're gonna be made fun of, and I was a sensitive kid. And so I remember the oldies I like to sing, and the colorful shoes or shirts I like to wear, and the things I like to play on the piano as a kid. Like I remember every single time that I showed that I liked that stuff, by everybody closest to me, I was mocked immediately and incessantly, and that became, well, then I'll do whatever you'll tolerate. And so music is what I loved outside of basketball that whole time, but as a young kid, I put it aside because I just couldn't handle being made fun of that way. And so this last year, for what I went through to end up landing out here in Austin, was a big peeling back of all of these layers of things that I moved aside so that I could be whatever culture and society would tolerate of me. But music has always been there. And so after I made it through this transition of going from California to Austin, it was clear that the only thing I'd ever loved outside of basketball that has stood the test of time is music. And that's what I came out here to do. Because I sing and I write poetry and I write stories and I do stand-up and I do imitations and characters and voices, and at a very, very high level. But that was just something that I kept to myself because I still, at almost 40 years old, carry the burden of being mocked by those closest to me from a very young age. So yeah, music is the new thing, and that's why I'm out here.
Who would you say first taught you love and how?
I think about that often because our interpretation of love, it changes over time. Every time you meet somebody new that accepts you in a new kind of way, it kind of expands your idea of love. So I could look back and say, maybe from some family members I felt a warmth or a love as a child, but I could also say that it felt very conditional. And it would be maybe a little dramatic to say that at age 39, my current fiance is honestly the first person I've ever met that loved me without the performative aspect. Like that, if tomorrow I couldn't do any of the things that I'm really good at, that wouldn't change how she loves me. I would say that I've never felt that before. So I can remember as a child feeling the version of love that is tolerable. You don't know any better. And so as a kid, like, yeah, you got family around and you feel that version of it. But as your understanding of love grows and it becomes non-conditional, it really wasn't until last year where I felt somebody love me infinitely, without the need to perform, that no matter what mistake I might make or A- I might perform at, that she loves me regardless and will go out of her way to tell me. I feel like it was just recently that I experienced love in a way that is the most meaningful thing that I've experienced in that department.
How do you define love?
Like that, that not unconditional in the sense that someone could do something horrible, but that it's not based on high-level performance all the time. And so I feel things very deeply in my world, and I almost feel like I have to keep some of that love to myself, because some people are so uncomfortable dealing with and receiving, especially men, that kind of appreciation and love, that I find it to be very important to share or for me to share my feelings about other people when they do something special, or when they are something special, when they're just out there living their life in a beautiful way. I mean, I like telling people that. And so a lot of times we reflect the shortcomings in the way that we received love, and we reverse that, and then we share it with the world. And so the way that I felt that love was conditional for me, I like to love people unconditionally. And sometimes that means that I put myself in a position where I might get hurt, but I feel that it's worth it, because I find amongst people generally, but men specifically, that they do not receive love all that much, and that we are expected to get out there and get things done. And I like getting out there and I like get things done, but sometimes we want to feel safe and loved as well. And as much as I like being a provider, and I do, sometimes I want to be the little spoon and be held and be told that everything's going to be all right. And I don't think it's a sign of weakness to want that. I know that I used to, and a lot of men do, feel that to be vulnerable and to feel like you need support like that would be a sign of weakness, and that you just wax your mustache, grunt your throat, and grin and bear it. But I don't think that that's the move. I think that's old-fashioned. And so, yeah, I like to love with my whole heart, because I felt that was absent from my life.
What's a good day look like for you?
The timing of that question is quite something, because I've been working 7 days a week for the last 3.5 months. And so I moved out here with not a specific plan, but that I needed to pursue creative endeavor. And I underestimated the difficulty and the chaos of being out here in Austin. And in order to save some money and have a place, I decided, well, if I work 7 days a week, I can save enough money and still on the side do my creative things. And working 7 days a week in customer related type stuff burnt me out, man. And so today, right now, this thing right now is the first day off I've had since 2022. The first day that I am not tied to going to something retail related, going from one job to the next. And so I have been doing 7 days a week for so long that I didn't even have the opportunity to think of what a perfect day was. But I just in the last couple of days I started writing it down, that I like to get up early. I like to work out early, and then get some coffee and do some creative work. I work at a place where we have a cold plunge and sauna. Go stimulate your brain in the cold plunge and the sauna and get your endorphins up and your dopamine going. And with that feel-good energy, I mean, I'll go out to Butler Park or one of these parks over here and just watching people be present. Like I never realized I was a creative type, because so long ago I pushed that aside to get shit done, that the very sensitivity of feeling things deeply means that I see the world in a way that not everybody does. And so making sure that I have the time to just exist and have some space and have some patience and observe and write about how I feel and write about what I see, take that on stage, sing about it, tell a story about it, write some poetry about it. I now have 3 days off a week where I can do that, where I can get out there, get some exercise, eat some good food, get some movement in, and then just let the creativity that I've always felt inside of me just come out.
What's a bad day look like, and how do you get through that bad day?
I'm prone to isolation when I don't feel well, which in turn makes things worse. So if I am not feeling, if I didn't get good sleep, if I'm not feeling good about what I'm doing in life to this day. And it's always been this way. Before drugs, before adulthood, I have a hard time getting out of bed. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I don't think it's something unique to me. But just the very act, the bed is so comfortable and everything else is so imposing and so difficult when you're not feeling great that, yeah, there are definitely days where I feel like I cannot leave the bed and or leave my bedroom. And I think on this journey that I'm on through creativity and creative pursuit and these endeavors that feel very meaningful, that as the more meaning that you have in your life and the more you understand your place in this world and how your puzzle piece fits into the culture, I'd like to think that would happen less and less, but maybe not ever, never. Because it's been there my whole life, this proneness to very low and dark feelings that there might not ever be a time where that doesn't pop up, but I would love that to be the case. But yeah, a bad day makes it very hard to do anything, and very small things feel impossible.
Do you just let those bad days pass, or is there anything you do to help you get through that bad day in general?
That's a good question. So the go-to would be to experience the badness, criticize yourself for feeling that way, add a little extra self-resentment, judgment onto it. And obviously saying that, it sounds silly, it sounds like it's not helpful, it sounds like it's not the move. But maybe it's a bad habit, or maybe it's something that is a natural thing to do. But the more I talk to people out here, a lot of people in Austin have moved through things like that. And it's one thing to know within myself that it's not a good move. But from my fiance, from some of these other people that I've met in town, for them to point that out, it feels pretty meaningful to say, hey, it's one thing to have a bad day. You don't have to throw any gasoline on your own fire. And so instead of giving myself shit for not feeling well, adding more fuel to that fire, you could just say, yeah, today's not the day. And if you want to lay around, if that's what it's going to take to have you feel better or to get through the day in a more tolerable way, then you can do that. And as soon as you do that, the softness, the grace, the tolerance of it being okay to not feel 100%, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, all right, well, I mean, I'm sure I could do something. Yeah, and then I get myself moving that way. And so just to not add the added burden of hyper self-criticism on top of having a not so good day, that's been a way that I found to tolerate the bad ones a little bit more, is to not add any of my own bullshit on top of it.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
10 years ago, I was working retail, Starbucks, Trader Joe's, and I got to a point where when I was 20, that was fine. When I was 30, I hated it. And I did a 4-year apprenticeship to learn about how to work with dogs. And so for the last 10 years, I've worked with dogs. Did a 4-year apprenticeship, 4.5, spent 5.5 years having my own business working with dogs, and that's what I did before coming out here. Towards the tail end of COVID, the isolation that came from it and the separateness that was imposed, and my business, it's not that it was struggling, it's that working with dogs is a very much an alone type business, and when we weren't allowed to be around people and everybody became a potential person that might kill me by breathing at me or being near me, that was an imposed isolation that I was not expecting. And so in the last 10 years working with dogs, the last 2 years of it, 3 years of it being the COVID years, I started to not feel great mentally from being isolated. I was in a relationship that was not working out. I was getting a little burnt out working with dogs because it's 24/7. They're around me all the time. And I started to, I guess I would call it self-medicate, but rather than going down to the dark alley in the cliche movie idea of getting drugs, I went down to the produce stand where they had these little blue bottles called Feel Free. And out in Texas, I see them everywhere, and they seem innocuous. It doesn't seem like a very big deal, but what it is highly concentrated kratom and kava. And I started drinking those as just a way to alter my mood. That was the kind of addict that I was in anything that could make me not feel sober, anything that could take me out of the mood that I'm in and feel differently, I would do that. And it started just doing having one or two a day, and it was just kind of nice. And in that isolation and the frustration and the relationship falling apart, I got up to, in about a year and a half, I got up to about 5 to 7 a day. And they're these little blue bottles, and they taste terrible. And I do remember the first time that I took one in order to go to sleep. And that means you've moved past take this to feel good, now you take it to feel okay. First you use it to get elevated, then you use it to feel normal. And I do remember the time that happened, and I fell into about another year of addiction into these little blue bottles until one day I realized that this is beyond something that I can do myself. And so my fiance at the time, we went out to Utah for a vacation, and I told her what was going on and that I needed to taper with these little drinks and withdraw from them on this vacation. And I underestimated the severity of it in a way that I never thought I could feel as horrible as I did. And so it took 11 days to withdraw from these drinks, and it took me from even towards the end, I was still doing my job well and pulling through and doing all that. But I spent 11 days withdrawing from this stuff, no sleep whatsoever, maybe like 15 minutes every now and then, and her having to witness who she loves, myself, not being able to walk, to move. I could barely talk. I did document that journey, and I'm planning on sharing it at some point. And during the whole time that I was going through that, and her keeping an eye on me in that same, like, I can assure you, in a situation like that, it is very difficult to feel like you're lovable. And so to have been at my weakest point, feeling completely broken and ashamed of putting myself in this position, to have somebody there to care for me during that process was really powerful. But at the same time that I was going through that, she and I were also dealing with an unsuccessful pregnancy, we'll call it. And for me to be going through that at that level and having to watch her deal with what she had to deal with in that situation, this was two people in the most severe circumstances in life, I mean, that I've experienced. Certainly people can go through a lot more than that, but for me to be going through that, her to be going through what she was going through at the very same time, like, it brought us to our literal and metaphorical knees. And at the end of that 2 weeks or so, I ended up taking what's called NAD. A lot of people are familiar with it out here. It's an injection that goes to work on your body and helps you feel better. And it was the first night I was able to get some sleep after 11 days. And she moved through, to the most part, what she had to move through with her experience. And it was so absolutely, utterly devastating that once we made it through, it was like we were barely even people at that point. Like, it was so devastating and so humbling and so powerful that once we landed on the other side, we felt like we needed a little bit of momentum in the positive to prove that we made it through that. And as soon as life started to go back to normal, me now sober, having moved through that, granted it took about another 6 months to actually feel decent after that. She continued to move through what she was moving through, but that after about 3 weeks of improving since all that, that's when I asked her to marry me, because I like to, for somebody to stay by your side at the lowest point that you felt you could possibly be in and not think any less of you. During that time, she said something along the lines of that she was worried that once I get better, that I would break up with her and find somebody better. And that hurt me so much to hear. I said, well, would it not be more likely that my gratitude towards you before was already very high, and for you to oversee me through this most brutal of experiences, what's to say that I wouldn't love you more afterwards? And upon landing on that other side, that's exactly how I felt. Like, to the point where I could not imagine spending the rest of my days with another person when someone was willing to usher me through a complete and total devastation and rebirth of myself as a person. And so that's long story long, like, that was the most humbling, take me to my knees experience that I could ever have imagined. I did not expect it. It was absolutely torturous. And there was this woman by my side, gracefully, to the degree that she could, walking me through it while dealing with something extremely difficult on her end. And it was at that point that I then, like I said, asked her to marry me and said, Austin seems like a spot. I don't think I could stay at this house. I don't think I could stay at this state. It all reminds me of these brutal last few years. You want to go to Austin? And she said yes. So that was one of the most brutal experiences of my life, and fully changed how I see the world, where things can never be the way they were. And all the things that I pushed aside that people told me was impractical, or that men don't do that, I realized that's the stuff that I always loved. We don't choose what we love. We don't choose what we're passionate about. And all those things that I pushed aside due to mockery, whatever it may have been, that's all I do now. And that's all I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. I'll still work some dogs if I need to. I do a little pack walk on Saturday mornings here, and I'll still do that because it's lucrative. But the thing that makes me feel the most alive now is to share a creative experience. And it's nice to feel that I'm good at it, but more importantly than that, it makes me feel good to do it and to share it.
What's the hardest thing you've been through?
Insert last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never. There's a symptom of withdrawals, which is common with benzodiazepines as well as with opiates, called akathisia. And if you don't know what it is like that feeling when your foot falls asleep and you get the tingles and feels like little electricity shooting through your nervous system, and that would reveal itself during these withdrawals the moment I tried to sleep. So if I were upright, it would not happen. And as soon as I would lay down horizontally, all of a sudden your foot starts to move. You start to feel it creep up your leg, move over to your other leg, and then creep up your body until you're almost going through something akin to a seizure, and that you have absolutely no control over whatsoever, and it only manifests when you lay down horizontally. And so at the time, I remember saying that it was the closest to a torture method, a non-violent torture method, than anything I could ever imagine. As soon as I haven't slept for 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and as soon as you go horizontal, that's when those symptoms start creeping in, and it would usually be within about 3 or 4 minutes. And so that experience itself, to every time I wanted to sleep, to lay down and have sleep be replaced with uncontrollable movements, that is something that I would not wish upon anybody. And so the whole thing, like, I couldn't move well, I couldn't speak, I couldn't think, but that particular symptom through those withdrawals was not like anything I have ever experienced from a torturous standpoint. And so that part of that experience was so brutal. I'm pretty good with my words, and words fall way short of really being able to convey how dreadful that was.
So for this next question, if you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual, Can you tell us about a time in your life that you relate to the word war?
Up until that experience, I really felt like I was at war with myself, and that there are still aspects of that I'm dealing with now. I don't think it's a one day you're done sort of a thing, but this war with myself is still the demands of perfectionism, and then the things that I know that I love to do versus the things that I think I will be received positively for. And I think a lot of that is the conditioning of how I was treated as a child. Granted, I do know that my parents were just doing their best, and maybe that it went better for us than it went for them, and so that was still forward momentum as far as that's concerned. But I feel like I'm constantly at war with myself for being hypercritical, judgment, doing what others will tolerate of me versus what I want to do. And granted, I've made a lot of strides and a lot of steps in the direction that feels important and powerful and meaningful and valuable, but I don't even know if ever that feeling will go away where reflexively and initially I'm not met with, that's not good enough, it's never going to be good enough, you should probably just do something more practical. Like I could foresee a decade or two down the line of doing it and it being met with, actually I'm not really as interested in how it's met these days, but I could see myself further down the line of this life of creative endeavor. I could foresee eventually coming to terms with not being at war with myself, but because it's all I've ever known, you have a very hard time imagining that there will be a point when I'm not in what feels like pretty regular battle with me, myself, my decisions, my lack of being perfect, and the way what I'm going to do is going to be perceived by others. I feel that while other people's criticism is one thing, and that very few people like to be criticized, nobody is even capable of criticizing me as much as I'm capable of criticizing myself. And so, yeah, I feel that I've been at war with certain parts of myself in certain ways for my whole life. And I would love to see myself at some point in the future to just be okay with the thing that I am, because I do know that I'm special. It's not that. It's that I was conditioned that nothing was ever good enough, and I don't know if that ship is ever going to be off my shoulder.
So for this next question, it's the same type of question. If you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you relate to the word peace?
It's only ever little bits at a time. So after I do something extremely difficult, the mind has a certain way of easing, and that could be the sauna. The sauna is extremely difficult. It takes your body to a place that is on the verge of death, and your body rewards you for that. The cold plunge, get into 37-degree water and hang out 34-degree water. Hang out there for a few minutes. Your brain doesn't even have anything left to be at war, which in turn creates a certain piece. A very hard workout will do it. Anywhere where I'm present, anywhere we're in a creative flow, in that flow state, playing basketball is still very valuable to me. So it's these glimpses of peace, which I don't know if being at peace 100% of the time is even, I don't know if it's possible or if it's even the aim. It's nice to feel a little bit of conflict, something for you to overcome. But I would sure be okay with longer bouts of peace. And my fiance is incredible at maintaining a kind of peace that just being in her presence also affords me a peace that I don't generally have on my own. And so yeah, I've really only seen it in clips and phrases and bits and pieces where after doing something difficult or being so engrossed, so engaged in something that you're so far out of your own head that state seems to be pretty close to peace. Even if it is, like, I think it paints the picture of meditation, staying there doing nothing, and you got that peace, but I would argue you could be completely engaged in something And that peace means you don't have that background chatter, judging, criticizing, wiggling its way into your brain to say anything. And so after doing something extremely difficult and being in a state of flow and presence is where I feel the most amount of peace in my life. So I suppose doing more of all of that could cultivate, let's call it a peace practice.
Can you tell us about a truly joyous moment in your life and how that felt?
Honestly, I woke up today feeling that way, where when you work very hard for something and it finally starts to pay off. For me, that's very joyous. And so when I proposed to my fiance, it was pretty powerful. It felt like I could see the next, I'm 39 years old. I could see the next 50, 60 years play out almost all at once, which was lovely, joyous, absolutely. But just waking up this morning and knowing that today, this experience, but this day and from here on out, I now have enough free time and opportunity to actually pursue not just what I came out to Austin for, but that feels like what I prepared the last 39 years for. Like, it feels more than just this temporary joyousness. It feels like I didn't realize that memories could be altered retroactively, that at a certain point in your life, if you figure something out, then you can look back at everything that happened before. And now it feels like it had a reason, it had a purpose. The pain and the frustration now gets to be transmuted into something from here on out that means that everything that happened in the past that wasn't great molded you into the person that's capable of doing the things that you're able to do now. And that without that, it's just suffering for the sake of suffering. And you can only tolerate so much of that if you suffer and there doesn't seem to be any reason for it, it feels like torture. And then as soon as you can turn your suffering into something that is meaningful and that matters and that can be creative or artistic, or it feels like I can tolerate or I can come to terms with everything that's happened in the past, because from here on out, I'm going to use that experience to make the world better, to help people, to be creative, to do anything from within and take that and send it out. Well, it changes how I feel about everything that's happened, because holding stored resentment is, we know it, but it's fucking poison. And as soon as that can be used as something to move forward with, that I feel it feels very powerful to have taken everything that has happened up till now and to use it for the second half. If let's say twice 39 to 78, that's close to an average age where someone, a life expectancy. And so to now take this second act, this second half, and use everything that happened that I was not a fan of in the first half to make the second half better, doesn't seem that bad.
What inspires you?
Music. I'm currently listening, as a lot of Austinites are, to Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act. And because he's a music producer, a lot of it pertains to music, but for anybody in any sort of creative field or endeavor. I'm on my second time reading it / listening to it. I would firmly recommend it. So music is the place where I can disappear into that presence and joyousness and all of that. But just listening to somebody talk about their creative process and creative endeavor, and Rick Rubin goes about it by really letting people know you have it within you. It's not about adding things to your life or adding all these creative ideas, but stripping it down to where you can share and really be comfortable with it. You are creative. You don't have to force it. You have to just relax and let it come out. That it has opened my eyes to all the ways that I felt I've always been creative, but discounted it because it just didn't seem like something that I could do with my life. And so, music and anything creative are what's really driving me right now.
What keeps you up at night?
Mistakes of the past. It's easy to look back. It's nice to move through this sort of stuff that I've been moving through, But yeah, your head hits the pillow and all of a sudden you're like, dang, did I really need to do or say that back then? And it doesn't help with anything, and I am getting better at it. But also, as far as what's keeping, it's not all negative. That I'm very excited about what lies ahead. And so thinking about this path that lies ahead can also keep me up all night, because I might have had a very long day, but as soon as I lay down, I'm like, well, I could spend an hour on the computer messing with some music. I could do that. That would feel really nice. And so it's, yeah, sometimes it's negative things, and I haven't fully figured it out here in Austin. And so what lies ahead, from a difficulty standpoint, can get in my head, but also the excitement of every single day I see these things aligning in a way that finally makes me feel like the path that I'm on is the truest version of the thing that I'm here on earth to experience. That'll keep you up at night. That's big. That's existential. And so it's not all negative. Sometimes it's thinking about, holy shit, I see not just where my puzzle piece as a human in this world fits, but I can see it as it moves ahead. And I don't think I've ever felt that before, except for when I was a child and those dreams of basketball. Like, I could see that play out forever, not realizing that by this age, basketball would have been done. But music I can do for the rest of my life, as long as my ears stay functional.
What's the biggest thing that keeps you going every day?
Creativity. That over the years I have noticed my creativity, pushed it aside so that I can say, do, and be things that are more easily able to be digested by others. And that's not the move. I didn't realize that dumbing or dampening yourself down in order to be tolerated or perceived in a particular way by others immediately means that you're not being the truest version of yourself. And I mean, my heart is pure, my ethics are in place. I don't feel like I have to change myself to be digestible to people to the same degree anymore, because what I do feel like is that I have some specialness in me that the more I move away from it, the less I get to be me, and the less people get to experience kind of a unique, weird creature. And we like unique, weird creatures. There's plenty of people to fit in and blend in, and that's fine. It's not a matter of good or bad. But when someone stands out, as a kid, it's a lot to deal with, and so I still have something, part of me still carries that burden. But as an adult, yeah, we like to see somebody chase down the things that make them interesting. And so, yeah, I'm really just trying to work on allowing the creativeness that I've always felt to come through at its fullest. And it isn't by adding things, it's by deconstructing all of these walls that I've built up to try to force myself to be more easily taken in by others. And it's become very clear that that's not the move. So I'm shedding these layers of walls that I've put up in order to be seen in a way that was less judged by others. But there's just no way that you can enter a creative endeavor without the accompanying judgment. It's just a part of it. And you have to be so strong or so capable or so willing, so desirable or so desiring to share that creativity that you almost can appreciate and respect that, yeah, I'm not for everyone. It could be 50-50, it could be 70-30, but those 30 that might enjoy what I'm doing, those are my people. And that we can't just be loved by everyone. It just doesn't work that way. Once you take a stand, you lose half the audience. And that's okay.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
If you asked me that last year, I would have a lot. If you asked me that 5 years before that, I would have even more. But now, to have found something that otherwise felt unattainable, which is the okayness with the version of myself that feels the most real, I mean, I'd be okay with it. Like, I work hard. I'm I've learned a lot. I impact the world in a positive way, and I finally found the thing that makes me tick more than anything, and I don't think I need a lifetime of proving that to be okay with it. Like, I feel like I found something magical that some people not only will never find, but even on their deathbed would say, I can't even look at that in the face because it's too scary and I regret it too much. But that I wouldn't prefer to die. But if I found myself on my deathbed, I would say, hey, found out a lot, learned a lot. This was a wild experience, and I'm grateful for it. So that feels nice to have come to terms. Like, I came so close to not being around last year that I did have to come to terms with what it might be like to die, and that's a big part of what changed everything. Is that now I came so close to not being around that everything after that feels like a bonus. Yeah, so I'm okay with that.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
I mean, I said basketball when we started this, but there were these nuggets at the time of music and performing, but not in a way that's look at me, but in a way that, hey, I've got magic and music coming through me and I'd like to share that with you. And so as a kid, it was basketball and it was sports and it was all of that. But underneath all of that, it's music. It's music and it's creativity, and that is what drives me more than anything right now. And knowing that everything from here on out is all going to be making more sense of that. It's music and creativity is what I wake up thinking about every single day, and feels like the most meaningful path forward. It doesn't necessarily lay itself out in a way that is obvious as far as how to be successful in it. And if it means that I have to work dogs to pay my bills so that I can do that, that's fine. But yeah, creative endeavor and music is the only thing that drives me now, and it feels very powerful.
You're the co-author of your life story. What's your picture perfect storybook ending?
It would be fine for me, like how I feel now about it. Feels like it might feel just as good as how it feels 40 years from now, with an entire second half of things that I've created. Just knowing that I've found the thing that I'm gonna do for the next however long feels just as special as what it's going to feel like 40 years from now to have done it for a long time. So whether it was the storybook ending is, he just transitioned from this life of doing what he thought others wanted of him, and now he's going to do what he's always wanted to do. That feels just as special as having 4 decades of, whether it's material or things to show, it's like just having found it. Like, it could fade to black, just going from the frown of what it used to be and the smile of realizing what it just was feels just as valuable, or what it's going to be, feels just as valuable as, now look, I did it for the last 40 years. Here's my catalog of stuff. Because, like, yes, I want to build a community of people that like the same things, share that amongst that, share that with the world, let that out. But just having found the thing that makes me feel like a magical human being feels as powerful as what's going to come because of it. And so I feel like I found a thing that we all talk about. Find that thing that you love to do that makes you feel special. Find a way to do it for the rest of your life. It's a cliche to hear it. It doesn't feel like a cliche to find it. It doesn't like to think about, oh, well, what do you do in life? Oh, you find the thing that you love and you do it for the rest of your life. Like, yeah. But to feel as though you found that and to behave in the world as such, yeah, I feel like I found the needle in the haystack. So,
how does that feel for you?
Unbelievable. It's in its infancy, and so it's hard to know where it's going to go, but that doesn't feel important to know where it's going to go. It's that now I have, and I have come to terms with, that it's okay to love what you love and to do what you do and to do the things that feel the most meaningful. And if that means sometimes it's a struggle, at least you're struggling to make sure that you do the things that you find most valuable, rather than struggling to do a bunch of jobs that you don't like, that aren't meaningful, that you get home at the end of the day and you need to drink because of, or try to forget, or never. Like, it's all I think about every day is creative stuff, and I can already see how that's building to more creativity. And so it feels incredible. It's all I ever think about now, is to just allow myself to be the thing that I've always been, but at a certain point was convinced myself that it wasn't okay to be. That feels momentous.